1. This story happened about a decade ago when I was still a teenager and used to live in my parents' house. We're migrants and are on good terms with all the neighbors since the 90s, but we do have a reputation in the neighborhood of frequently undertaking ambitious DIY home improvements, and in an atypical manner to what locals expect. Our house is separated from the neighbors with a living hedge wall of cypress trees that grow on our property. At the time of this story, we already lived in the house for the better part of a decade, with the same neighbors and the same cypress trees. One day, out of the blue, one of the neighbors sees my mom working in the garden and starts complaining about the state of the living hedge on her side of the property. We usually trim the hedge only on our side and most of the top that we can reach. The neighbor complains and demands us to trim the hedge from their side as well. In her eyes, as the hedge wall is planted on our property, it's 100% our responsibility, and they are tired of maintaining it from their side. The altercation is very brief as my mother surprisingly quickly replies, "Okay," and walks off grinning. Unbeknownst to the neighbor, we were already planning to cut down the hedges to the stump so that they could regrow anew, as the existing hedge was very old and not particularly sightly. Previously, we postponed these works as we did not want to upset the neighbors, but this demand provided the perfect excuse. So the next day, while the neighbors were at work, we cut down all the hedges surrounding our property to barely above ground. As we were finishing clearing up the trimmings, the neighbors came back home from work, shocked to discover the hedge practically gone. They looked around and realized that the hedge wall was gone. Their whole backyard, kitchen, living room, and bedroom are on full display through the windows. The neighbor questions what we have done and why, as they would no longer have any privacy in their own home. My mom, without missing a beat, replies, "We fixed the problem. The hedge will no longer need trimming from your side," and goes back to clearing up. Within a week, the neighbors came back to us and asked for permission to construct a wooden fence on our property to protect their privacy. We happily agreed, as long as they paid for it all. As we didn't mind waiting a couple of years for the hedge to regrow, our privacy was much less impacted. They built the fence within the week, and it provided a good surface for some vine flowers to grow instead of the cypress trees that my mother had wanted to plant for a long time. Now, you might be concerned that the neighbors would try to claim some of our land as theirs. This is not the case, as the property delineation markers are still there and nobody would ever move or tamper with them. Even if they did, this is in an EU country and our land is marked based on specific coordinates and not some arbitrary lines as a fence, no matter the situation. When the fence was being constructed, we made sure that this was the case. 2. So this is a fun little story from my last job working in a vegetarian and vegan food factory. It was the worst job you can imagine. The place smelled like rotting food at all times. The employees rarely ever do anything to prevent spreading illnesses. They would regularly show up sick even during COVID, and management was just the worst. I quickly adopted the policy of doing the least irritating job I could find, and trying to avoid listening to my shift lead since he was a prick. For the sake of the story, let's call him Jim. Jim was a by-the-numbers guy, to the point that if you argued with him using logic, he would tell you you're wrong, and his math, yes, he would point that phrasing out very deliberately, was what they were going to use, and to not think above your pay rate. So, on this particular night, I worked from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. Jim decided he wanted to be really lazy, since the building owner was going to be gone for the week, and he wouldn't have to report anything to him for days. He spent his whole night just sitting in the office playing games on his phone, ignoring our calls because we needed assistance. After about 8 or 9 p.m. rolled around, and me finally getting pissed off enough to care, I asked my department manager if he could cover me for a couple of minutes to get Jim in here to help. We needed him to get maintenance because the machine sealing a product called Tempeh was barely sealing any at all, and we were throwing away about 70 to 80% of all packages. I get into his office, and before I can say a single word, Jim says very loudly, "Whatever it is, I don't care, just leave me alone tonight." I tried to get in a word, but he just glared at me and said, "Just get the fuck out and don't bother me again." Then an evil thought crossed my mind. Cue the malicious compliance. "You want just me to not bother you, Jim, or does that mean everyone?" I asked, and he says the words that screwed him over. "As long as I'm not bothered, I don't care." "All right," I say, and leave with a grin that most anime villains dream of doing. I get to my department manager and tell him that Jim doesn't want to be bothered at all tonight. My manager looks at me, kind of confused at first, and asked what the hell does that mean, to which I just told him, Jim doesn't care what happens as long as no one bothers him. Me putting a big emphasis on the last part. Now, my department manager was a guy you go to for getting information around the building fast. He's a fast talker and quick on his feet. He lets me get back to my spot and very quickly starts darting around to each department to inform them of what transpired. Needless to say, Jim wasn't bothered at all the entire night. He even had to be woken up at 3 a.m. to do his nightly paperwork because he fell asleep. During the night, the machine packaging the soy hot dogs had started sealing poorly, and we couldn't get any maintenance out there until it's been approved by Jim, so we just ran it all night. By the end of the night, my line, I worked in the boxing department boxing up the tempeh, had thrown away roughly 4 tons. We used large red buggies that would hold at least 500 pounds, and we chucked 17 of those suckers. I won't even try to count up the dogs that were thrown out too. Needless to say, this was going to hit the company hard. The fallout. Next day, my shift comes in, and to no one's surprise, Jim is on my ass right away. "Why didn't you inform me that we were losing so much product?" He starts screaming in my face. "The owner looked at his email and saw that we lost nearly $15,000 in product alone last night." I simply smiled at Jim and said to him, "I would have said something, but you told me not to bother you all night." Jim, realizing he could be in trouble for this, doubles down on trying to blame me. "You had a duty to tell me, even if it's against my orders," he shouts. I calmly put my helmet on and my colored coat, smile and say, "Sorry, I didn't think because it was above my pay grade." And then I went out onto the floor quite happy that I knew he was either going to be in a ton of trouble or fired. Sadly, he wasn't fired, only in trouble. His position was nearly up for grabs, and he had to work every day for 6 months after that, with only Sundays off, before they eased up on him. Did he learn from this? No. He was still a total prick that the whole staff generally acted nice to, but hated with a passion. 3. Disclaimer, this didn't happen in the US or UK. English isn't my first language, but I'm working on it. I'm a 22-year-old male. Work as a teacher at my college's application school. We work little hours and we get paid a small amount of money too. It's like an internship. For the past semester, I've been dealing with a supervisor whom we'll call Sheila. She's 40 years old. Sheila is one of 4 supervisors at the school. The supervisors usually drop by your class once in a while to check if the students are having their needs met or to solve any issues, like a student that wants to retake a class, etc. My issue was that Sheila had a strange interest in me and, for some reason, focused way too much on what I did at class to the point of obviously overlooking other teachers. Because Sheila isn't a professor for my department, she only knew about me from colleagues or rumors around college. Such rumors include, I bring whole meals to college instead of eating at the cafeteria, like everyone. I was supposed to be in another college. Why? I am not actually from the state. This one is true, and so on. She confronted me about these rumors in front of colleagues, but I brushed it off, which seemed to annoy her. Sheila then began to try to find out things I wasn't able to do. She asked me questions about buying a very specific device. Imagine something like a Wi-Fi camera, which I, of course, wasn't able to answer. She giggled and looked smug after that. I, however, managed to answer her other questions, even if they didn't relate to my field, which made her slightly upset. In one of those semesters, an older student that is a lawyer, Amanda, 60 years old, started to request some things from me that I wasn't able to nor had permission to give. Such things include a free, school-approved, good digital dictionary, extremely detailed and personalized exam, and exercise corrections. detailing on my methodology, explanations of the goals of every lesson, and audio transcriptions of exam materials. Due to Amanda's lawyer occupation, she worded those requests to me in a very formal way. Our school is careful with lawyer students due to some legal issues that happened in the past. Something like a student trying to fire a teacher because they got caught cheating. Because I wasn't able to fulfill her request due to a lack of permission, and I'm not interested in going to court, I asked her to forward her request to my superiors. And guess who answered them? Sheila. Sheila didn't even bat an eye to Amanda's requests and started forwarding them to me, saying that I should comply. Because Amanda got what she wanted, she began sending more and more requests, to the point that Sheila just told me to accept all forwarded requests and be fast about it. So I did it. I sent materials, transcripts, and the like, all in the name of the school. Amanda was very happy, and Sheila was loving the extra work I was doing. She thought she was being smart and had the upper hand. Well, not until Sheila tried to embarrass me in front of my class. She said that despite my excellent work, I'm standoffish, and that's funny. My students tried to correct her statement, but she just ignored them by saying, "Really?" and swiftly left. She tried to pull this again at an online class, and another group of students shut her down again. I emailed her shortly after that saying that I would prefer her observations about my work be done in a private setting, rather than in front of the whole class. She replied immediately, denying everything and said that I was imagining stuff. She even tried to manipulate me by saying that she was the most vocal supervisor in my favor and was ceaselessly requesting a promotion for me, which I never got. In the end, she assured me that no further comments would be made. That's what I foolishly thought. During a meeting, my boss addressed all of us a concern from an unnamed supervisor that said us teachers were getting embarrassed by her presence. My boss said that such behavior was unacceptable and that they are there to help. At that moment, I saw red. I couldn't believe Sheila had twisted my words and told my boss about the email exchange, portraying me as the bad guy. At one point in the meeting, I asked the other supervisors if we teachers were supposed to do everything I was asked to for Amanda. They all replied a firm no, and even gasped when I mentioned transcripts. Basically, our school doesn't have the authority to provide transcripts, and students could legally contest test results if a mistake was present in the transcription. I then requested a meeting with my boss and another supervisor about this. In the meeting, I pointed out that they said that we weren't supposed to be doing those tasks, but I was being ordered to do them anyway. My supervisor quickly opened the email and discovered that Sheila was sniping emails from me and my students and exclusively replied to all of them using her personal phone, before others could do or see anything. We also discovered that she was archiving some of the requests so they wouldn't be found easily. I helped them dig everything up, and my boss and the other supervisor said it was inappropriate of a supervisor to do that, and they would talk with her about this. I left the meeting feeling relieved and hoped something would be done. After a few weeks, I saw the supervisor in person, but she just said, "Excuse me," and quickly left to another room. I kid you not, this woman treats me like I'm the plague now. She avoids me, doesn't address me directly anymore, and best of all, was apparently assigned to another role that doesn't involve supervision of teachers. Even though she hasn't been greatly punished, I bet she'll think twice before making her comments again. 4. Going to try to be vague as I do still work there. So, this happened many years ago, and the main character is actually someone else, but most of the staff knew the details of what happened. So first, some background. This company has a production process, and there are cycles of this process throughout the shift. At the end of each cycle, you do an upload, not the actual thing. This upload has to be coordinated across multiple work teams, and the person who does it has plenty of other duties. But this is one of the most important ones. Let's call this person's job title Upload Operator, and I will call the person Rockstar. If this isn't done correctly, it can really slow down or even stop production, so the Upload Operator is typically pretty tenured and on the trajectory of being promoted. At this company, when we get new members of management, either external or internal, from a non-production role, It is not unusual for them to go through a phase I personally like to refer to as knowing just enough to be dangerous, or dangerous phase for short. We had a new manager join the company, Beavis, and they were assigned to night shift, which had become quite reliant on Rockstar in the interim. So Beavis went through a humble phase initially, and everyone really liked them and thought they would do well. Now, Beavis had actually taken a step or two down from their previous role at another company, wanting to do something less stressful. I only mention this because it seemed to fuel the hubris that was ultimately Beavis's demise. So, once they reached the dangerous phase, the change from humble newbie to overconfident jackwagon was jarringly sudden. One evening, Rockstar is doing what they do, and one work team was struggling to be ready for the upload. Beavis tells them that they don't upload until Beavis tells them to upload, period. End of discussion. Do you understand me? Cue malicious compliance. The rest of the shift, Beavis is paying zero attention to the operation. Not sure why they thought that was a good idea after such a conscientious exchange, but here we are. All night long, team leads were calling Rooster asking what was going on and why we hadn't uploaded so we could go on to the next cycle. Rockstar just kept saying, "I'm waiting for Beavis to let me know we can upload." And all along, Beavis was blissfully unaware of the shitstorm he had initiated. Towards the end of the night, Beavis finally decides to take a look at some operational dashboards and realizes something is really wrong. Now, this situation might have resulted in Rockstar getting in trouble, possibly even losing their job, if not for the bonehead decision that Beavis makes once they've realized what has happened. They shut down the shift and went home, without notifying anyone of the debacle or telling the night shift employees that they would need to come in the next day to finish the week's work that didn't get done because of him. When the day shift came in and were told they would have to come in on a weekend, there was a lot of backlash. Rockstar was ultimately told don't ever do that again, but was also immediately promoted to Beavis' position when Beavis was terminated post-haste. 5. Many years ago, I worked at a place with lots of arcade games and pizza, similar to Chuck E. Cheese. I was hired to do maintenance, repair, and set up these arcade machines. There was already someone there doing this, but they were never allowed to work more than 40 hours a week, and the place was open 7 days a week, 9 hours a day, 63 hours a week, not including prep for opening and cleanup after closing. At the end of my first shift, I was told that I was also expected to help with cleanup since everyone that worked close had to help with cleanup. All my shifts were close shifts. This meant I had less time before my morning classes than I expected when taking the job, but a few extra bucks was valuable to a starving college student. Fast forward about 2 months, new manager, fresh out of high school, gets his big boy boots on and starts making rules. First rule: a schedule with everyone's hours for the next week will be posted by Friday morning. Second rule: you must clock in before your posted shift start time, but not more than 5 minutes before your shift. Third rule: you must clock out at the end of your posted shift time, no more than 5 minutes after. At the end of my first shift, after these rules were created, I clocked out and left everyone else to do the cleanup. To be clear, it's not like I was getting time and a half overtime or anything. All I expected was to be paid my normal rate, and they didn't want to even pay that, so I clocked out and left. At the beginning of my next shift, they were angry. They expected me to clock out and then work over an hour for free. Every single shift. These were only 5-hour shifts, too. I refused. The next week, they posted a new schedule, with my shift ending an hour later. Since everyone saw the list, they all got mad. I guess they were all just fine with wage theft, until one person refused. The next week, everyone had an extra hour on their shifts. At this point, his wage theft scheme had failed. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and this new manager doesn't come in on Thursday. He doesn't come in until Monday, no schedule is posted. Monday afternoon, I go in to get my check and say, "See you next week." I'm told my shift started an hour ago. I say I made plans since I wasn't on the schedule. No schedule means I couldn't be on it. The manager pointed to a schedule posted on the wall, printed just hours before, after some of the shifts on it had already started. I thanked him for posting next week's schedule early and started to leave. Then I was threatened with termination, and I kept walking. Came back a week later and talked with the day shift guy doing the same job. He said it was a bad week. Many machines were down, and he was walking around with like $100 in tokens because he was spending much of his time giving refunds, to the point he didn't have enough uninterrupted time to make any repairs. He was also keeping a roll of masking tape with him to tape over the coin slots as the machines failed. This meant a lot more use on the remaining machines, which started to show it quickly. I go to clock in, and I was told I had been fired. I smiled and walked out. Spoke with the daytime guy a week later. Apparently, while they never filled my position, people with mechanical and electrical knowledge willing to work minimum wage are rare. Instead, he was getting 14 hours a week and time and a half overtime with a base pay almost twice what I was getting. This extra expense came out of the department budget, which also paid for replacement parts. Even before this, it was never enough to buy enough parts. This, from the department budget thing, was from the same manager. He didn't want normal payroll to go up. For a while, basically everyone was carrying around $20 in tokens to give refunds. But all the comps were unacceptable to the manager, so now only the sales desk could issue refunds. Which meant ordering pizza took forever, and many people just left angry rather than waiting for a refund. Most machines had tape over the token slots. This backup at the sales desk didn't last long, as few people were coming, and no one was booking parties anymore. Other than the staff, it was basically empty. It didn't even smell like pizza anymore. With no customers, the daytime guy finally had time to make repairs, but didn't have the parts to do most repairs. As far as I know, that manager stayed there until the place went under, about 8 months after I was fired for not working a shift that his own rules said I could not work. Before I go, I'd like to answer some questions that others have had regarding the story. There was a previous manager that wasn't great, but wasn't trying wage theft or any of that mess. Generally, things worked smoothly under her, and there was a long waiting list for booking parties. She was let go as soon as this guy graduated. I do not know why, but I assume nepotism. I could be wrong about that. Maybe she was doing something that got her fired. But if that was the case, then there were at least 10 people that were more qualified for the job. I never met the owner, or even knew his or her name. It was entirely possible to clock in and out more than 5 minutes outside of your scheduled shift. You just wouldn't be paid for that time. Everyone that stayed late clocked out late, and I'm pretty sure none of them got paid for that extra time. I know I clocked out late a few times and didn't get paid for the extra time. I worked closing shift on the Sunday before the Monday that I walked out. The previous week's schedule was still posted at that time, and I had not been scheduled to work on Monday or Tuesday of that week. I even asked the woman running the show that night about the new schedule, and she didn't know, but assumed we were just following the previous schedule. No one called me after the new schedule was posted. I was in the middle of a school-related project and only stopped to get my check, deposit it, and get back to the project. If he hadn't tried to force me to work that day, I probably would have worked the schedule from the previous week. But him being a bully made me follow his rules to the letter. Even if I was in the wrong to take the week off, he should have been painfully aware of what happened when I was gone for a whole week. Firing me when I was about to start working on cleaning up the mess he started was next-level incompetence. The daytime guy was no moron, but he also didn't really understand a lot of the machines. When I started, I had been repairing electronics as a part-time job and hobby for years, and finding and replacing a single bad part on a $500-plus arcade board was usually pretty easy for me. Sometimes the repairs looked insane because I had to work with what I could find at Radio Shack, but they worked. Daytime guy was great with mechanical stuff, but when I started, the soldering iron was in a dust-covered box because he had basically never touched it. It didn't even have the correct type of solder. He had stuff meant for plumbing repairs. When I left, cheap board-level repairs turned into expensive board replacements that there was no budget for. Before I got there, this wasn't a big issue because previous management always allocated extra money rather than having a machine just remain dead. New manager did not do this. Not sure why, but if I had to guess, it's because he didn't want to explain why these expensive board replacements stopped. and started again perfectly in line with my time there. Someone else was obviously watching the books, or else he wouldn't have played games without a paid daytime guy all that overtime. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 239. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please poke the like button. Thank you kindly. Right, I don't think there's any other business today. There's no shoutouts. So let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... This one comes thanks to Kathy Beckford. Thank you very much, Kathy. If you knew it was your final meal, what would you choose? Now, there's certain foodstuffs I enjoy, but I don't have because there will be consequences the next day if I do enjoy them. But if it was my last meal, then I'd probably choose a king prawn curry with fried rice, portion of mushrooms, right, in the Chinese, the way they do them in Chinese takeaways, with the little spring onions in there, and a portion of chips. And the mushrooms and the chips go on top of the curry. I would also have prawn crackers. I would wash that down with some ginger beer, possibly Fentimans. That's quite a good brand. I quite like that one. Although there's Hardages, that's one as well. Or if not, Old Jamaica is also a favourite too. And since I don't have to suffer the consequences, I would have extra. Probably have dessert too. So, why don't you let me know what you'd have if you knew it was going to be your last meal ever. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.